going to go over some very basic things to frame the discussion and get people on the same page. So, simple points, but kind of things to keep in mind while I'm going through the presentation, which will be focused pretty much on one specific area, what's going on at the Public Utility Commission, and then talk a little bit about legislation at the end. But our energy sector is changing. Why I have the consumption sector here is because the programs I'm going to be talking about are focused on all residential, commercial, and industrial customers. So the programs under Act 129 are pretty evenly divided because we have 37% approximately residential, 32% commercial, and 30% industrial, and the rest is transportation. Also, this is very much a changing landscape. We have natural gas taking over from coal as the dominant industry. Nuclear is kind of the quiet sleeper here that's been around a while, even though there's not a lot of new nuclear plants being built. And as you can see, we're really here talking about this small little slice of 3.16, which includes renewables, including energy efficiency. So the generation mix is changing, and that provides opportunities, great opportunities for this industry to transform itself. And we, as KEEA, really want to be part of that transformation, see both federal and state initiatives as the way to do that. So quick primer again on Act 129, which some of you work in, so you don't, as I said, don't really need this. But KEEA formed in 2007. I was their lobbyist at the time and worked on getting Act 129 into law. So it was a dynamic process with, frankly, a handful of people from our coalition, as well as environmental coalitions and others that wanted this to happen. So the bill was signed into law in 2008 and really became effective in 2009. So that gives you a sense of, this is still a fairly young industry in Pennsylvania. And the objectives under 129 are simply put here. Reducing energy consumption and peak demand through programs administered by each of the large major utility companies in the state. The PUC is the overseer of that initiative, and they make use of a contractor who's a statewide evaluator. So they're the main players in this. And then over time, the Public Utility Commission sets periodic goals to reduce that demand and see and to guide where these programs are going. So this is probably not new to anyone, but these programs apply to all companies over 100,000. So if it's small, rural electric, they don't have to do these programs under the law. They can voluntarily, but they don't always do that. So this is, pretty much a quick lay of the land. What this doesn't say is that First Energy is the largest player now in the state. Because if you combine the First Energy companies, which are basically, West Penn, Penn Electric, Med-Ed, and Penn Power, they make up more than PECO, for example, which is in the Philadelphia area. So out here in the western part of the state, there's both a lot of opportunity, but you do have 4 different companies with slightly different cultures under one umbrella, and you probably all realize that as well. So continuing with a rather high-level overview, the programs are divided into these phases. And I'm going to just give you a snapshot of what those phases look like, because that's the foundation for where we're going soon, hence why we're out here now. So the electric distribution companies are permitted to use a variety of measures and programs to meet the energy requirements under each of the phases. So that's going to be important too, because as the programs get more mature, it gets a little harder and a little more challenging, and more creative thinking needs to be done in order to eke out those values and to get the kinds of savings we'd like to see in Pennsylvania. You start off with some very basic programs, but as the utilities get more sophisticated in the area and the workforce is better trained, there's more opportunities to go deeper with energy savings. And if you remember the slide where I said the mix of industrial, residential, and commercial customers are pretty close to a third, and a third, give or take a little bit. So all classes of customers will benefit and can continue to benefit. So no matter what sector you're from, there is opportunity. So just a quick snapshot again, just keeping with the historic view, is phase one was wildly successful. The utilities all met their goals and they exceeded their goals. And they worked very hard to do that, and they trained a lot of conservation service providers, some who are in this room, and met the goals they were supposed to under the law. So they met goals of approximately 1% by 2011 and 3% cumulative by May 31st, 2013. This is a huge industry though, and it's a maturing industry. And some states are more mature in developing programs and implementing than others. But still, even in Pennsylvania, it's become, just for phase one alone, $4 billion in program benefits. So this is big stuff. We are now in phase two, and we're halfway through, and the reports are coming in, and the utilities hold stakeholders meetings. If you're interested, we've got some representatives from both First Energy, and Dave's up here from Duquesne, that put on stakeholder meetings and give reports. So you can keep up with this. And they're pretty dynamic because they take input from the people who are there, and we get into the weeds on these program designs and looking at mid-course corrections and what can be done better, what sectors are doing better than others, and it's a way to keep that checks and balance. So at the end of the day, the utilities have met their goals. They're not faced with huge fines if they don't comply. And it's starting to become an engine that's, I'd say, working pretty smoothly. So we're in phase two, as I said, and the one big difference is the goals were a little lower in phase two. And some of us say, we're going the wrong direction a little bit, we think you could do more, and we're hoping some of the federal policies that we're seeing coming up will give us opportunity to go deeper. On the other hand, these goals are being met and giving us more experience. And the other thing that's happened is the PUC has fine-tuned the process a little more. So in other words, phase one was one size fits all in terms of the goal. Phase two, you see West Penn at 1.6, which is over the life of the period 2013 to 2016, and PICO at 2.9%. So now, phase three, that's where we are, and I'm going to get into this in a little more detail because the timing of that is exactly why we're out here now. The planning process has gotten underway. KEEA and other advocates have asked that the process get started earlier so that we have consistency and programs keep going. And we feel that more planning is needed now because the simple measures that have guided this program before are now needing to be expanded and look at new ways to get those savings. So you probably can't even see this all that well, and it's just to show you a snapshot that in phase one, the utility companies really not only achieved their goals, but overachieved them by quite a bit. And in the past, they've been allowed to roll over those savings and into the next phase. So that's been something that when they're starting into phase two, they're already partway there. So to us, it's no surprise that they're already, on average, more than halfway to their goals. And in some cases, they haven't had to spend the dollars to get, they haven't had to spend half the dollars to get to that point. So, and on the demand reduction side, and I'll explain that a little more, but again, just a snapshot. In phase one, they also achieved their goals and exceeded their goals. And that's important because in phase two, due to some programmatic designs, the demand response programs did not go forward in phase two at this point. We're hoping that'll change in phase three, and there's some good news in that area. So the future is underway in terms of the commission has a process now, and they have already sought comments on some general issues in December. So there was an opportunity to talk about, okay, what are we missing? What do you think we should be doing in phase three? And I'm going to share with you some ideas, not everything KEEA filed certainly, but some of the kinds of key issues that KEEA has put forth to the commission looking at phase three. And stakeholder process is key. So on March 11th, and I'll put the schedule up at the end just when we're transitioning to the other speakers, on March 11th, the commission is going to come out with a tentative order. And that's key because the clock will start ticking on when the public can comment on these programs and these designs. And it'll also give us, for the first time, a snapshot of what the commission is thinking in terms of how they want to see those programs designed. So it gives information to the utility companies that are trying to get ahead of this and start planning, and it helps us advocate for our positions. So overall, just again, program evaluation has demonstrated so far, overall, that these programs have been successful and cost-effective. But we should also just take a moment and talk about some of the other benefits these programs have. It's not all just about reducing energy costs and saving load. There are other benefits to having these programs there, and they're not incidental. And what we would like to see is more quantification of those benefits that, frankly, we don't believe is happening to the level it could. Now, granted, some of the reason for that is because it's hard to do, especially if you're looking at how much behavior influences change in activity and for how long, for example. Should behavior be measured on a yearly basis to say, okay, well, yeah, they changed, a school did some great education and they were closed in summer and they saved a whole lot of energy, but when the school year starts out, depending on how the behavioral programs are designed, they can save sometimes up to 10% more. But is that a lasting savings? Well, that's some of the issues that are getting debated all the time. There's certainly job creation. There's a huge amount of job creation in this area. And I believe the ACEEE, the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, says that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe it's 7,900 jobs that have been created, direct and indirect, so far in this industry. And that if the Clean Power Plan, which you're going to be hearing a lot more about, which is going to be a good opportunity for Pennsylvania to take these resources, both energy efficiency and renewable energy, to the next level, that we need to start looking at how the Clean Power Plan can impact these other policies and jobs. So there's other benefits as well in terms of market risk reduction. Dan will talk about that, particularly with PJM and the wholesale markets. Grid reliability is increased when you have a diversified energy sources, and you have market transformation to cleaner resources and enhanced system reliability. All added benefits. So, as I said, the PUC seeks feedback now on whether to include energy efficiency and demand response in this next phase. And one of the interesting challenges for KEEA is we represent both energy efficiency and demand response providers. We think both are essential and complementary to keeping rates down, and that's key. But the Commission is going to be looking at, and has looked at in their newest potential studies, that balance. What's going to be the most effective? Is it going to be more energy efficiency? Is it going to be more demand response? So I'm just going to back up and give you one definition, and this is a definition of peak demand, which is defined under the Act, so we have a common language here, as the highest electrical requirement occurring in a given period. So for the EDCs, that means the sum of the metered consumption for all retail customers over a particular period. So demand response, on the other hand, is more temporary and creates downward pressure on wholesale market prices by taking actions to reduce the demand. So KEEA supports both. So again, no details have been finalized, even though some initial comments have been already filed in December. But what happened a couple days ago is the statewide evaluator, who is the entity hired by the PUC to technically examine the potential for all the energy efficiency and demand response that's considered cost effective. And they just came out with their report. Frankly, it's several hundred pages for both. I skimmed it for this, and I see some good news here, that by 2020, 13.2% potential cumulative across EDCs over a 5-year period. And one of the issues for KEEA is also short-term phases better, like we've had so far, basically 3-year phases, or is it better for the marketplace and ultimately for consumers if the programs are longer? Therefore, there's a market signal that these programs are going to be around. But frankly, it's a gamble, because if the rules aren't right and Pennsylvania tries to reduce our carbon emissions, and the rules aren't final, and the EPA says we should look at increasing our investment in energy efficiency, Pennsylvania wants to be ready to take that action without a lot of legislative back and forth. So KEEA right now is saying 5 years makes sense because it sends the right market signals that these programs are going to be around. The businesses can ramp up, the utilities have a little more certainty for planning, but there is a potential downside. So there is a gamble that if we end up with bad rules, not aggressive enough, then we're stuck with that for 5 years and into the 6th year. So one of the things is there's a piece of legislation that Representative Greg Vitalik has. He's the minority chair of the Energy, Resource, and Environment Committee in Harrisburg. He's got a couple pieces of legislation that are pending now. And he had a hearing yesterday. I testified before the committee on how energy efficiency can play a role in helping with compliance on the Clean Power Plan. And everyone isn't on the same page on this. You know, what does that mean? How do we get the biggest bang for the buck so that consumers don't pay a high bill to comply with any of the federal rules that come out around the Clean Power Plan, and yet still, you know, advance as a state, put things in place that we're advancing at the same time. In other words, the laws are sufficient enough to help Pennsylvania comply with any clean energy requirement. And one of the issues is that there's a price cap right now that's in place on Act 129. And I think the legislature, their thought was that you don't want runaway spending and just, you know, a lot of investments in things that aren't working and not really all that valuable. But our position is that there's significant M&V, measurement and evaluation. There's the price cap is redundant because there are other checks and balances within the Act. There's a technical resource manual and there's a total resource cost test, both of which provide the technical and economic cap, if you will, or guidelines for what is actually cost effective in this field. And I say I only have 2 minutes. So I want to make sure that I cover where we are with the potential study. Looks like, on average, if you look at a 5-year program, the potential study coming out from the PUC is saying about 1% a year is the potential in Pennsylvania, just on average. And the EPA is saying under the Clean Power Plan, they're not mandating this, they're simply saying, as a guideline, we see a lot of potential, and that potential is, on average, using best practices across 12 states, that the potential in this area is more like 1.5% a year. So one of KEEA's jobs is to advocate both with the legislature and the PUC to see if we can get those numbers up there, yet be realistic about it. So this is going to be, again, an exciting time to start digging into how we get there. And we're trying to work with utility companies, and we've had some really good conversations with them thus far about how do we design programs of deeper energy savings and still get to something a little more aggressive, should we say. So I'm not going to go through the sectors, what the potential study says. I think they speak for themselves. I think we'll see a lot more lighting. We'll see some more refrigeration programs on the commercial side. Industrial potential is higher on the motor side. And lighting is, for each sector, still a valuable and viable option, even though CFLs are pretty much everywhere now. And we need to be moving to the next generation of LEDs. So I'm going to run through a couple real quick points that I just want to be sure to cover. We also support more government institutions and nonprofit sector involvement. We also would like to see more on the multifamily side. We feel there's a lot of potential for further savings on multifamily that aren't necessarily happening. I think it's been a rough time for some of the utilities to get to those programs and be able to work with a large variety of public and private housing owners, et cetera. So we want to see that continue. We also understand that the utilities don't want to see a whole lot of carve-outs. It just makes it harder for them to get their job done. And so we've tried to be judicious about what we ask for there. We want to continue to see a low-income carve-out, and that pretty much summarizes that. If nothing else, all this says is that if there isn't a multifamily carve-out, we think there's room for more coordination in the various programs, and if there's a way we can be helpful with that. We'd also like to see whole house and whole building develop more. And we understand there's a longer ramp-up time for some of those programs, but it's essential to deeper savings. Which brings me back to, I'm not going to go through this since I just see I have less than a minute, but I do want to just say that having gas conservation programs as part of merging with Act 129 and have a gas component will really help. I don't know if it doubles the benefits, certainly, but certainly it does bring people, implementers who are going into the home and are looking at various electricity-only answers will then have a broader and more comprehensive at a lower cost approach to what we can do in our buildings. So that's huge. I'm not sure we're going to get gas conservation programs now, but Representative Vitale does have legislation that would set up goals for reduction. I know Pennsylvania is a hub of a lot of gas development, and we're saying, well, okay, gas development, but doesn't mean we have to just use the resource and use it not effectively or efficiently. And let's bring some of those benefits to Pennsylvania residents in the form of conservation programs, so they can see lower costs as a result of that. So that's huge. And the last 2 points here is that Governor Tom Wolf will have an opportunity to appoint a new chairperson of the Public Utility Commission. We haven't heard when that's going to be. KEEA has a candidate we're interested in seeing as chairperson who's already on the commission, Commissioner Gladys Brown. She's been on the commission only about a year, but she has deep background, having worked in the state senate. So we're looking forward to seeing, the leadership step up to the plate and do a little more on the both energy efficiency and renewable energy side. And then finally, the EPA carbon rules will be coming up this summer. I'm going to be turning this over to Matt, and he's going to tell you how this all fits together for us. Right, Matt?
I do my best.
Okay, thank you.